The House at the Edge of Silence. The Arrival. In the late autumn of 1983, a forgotten road cut through the farmlands of Indiana, leading to a house that no one claimed but everyone feared. Locals called it the House at the Edge of Silence. For years, it stood with its shutters closed, its porch sagging, its windows blind like eyes that had seen too much. One cold evening, a young woman named Rachel Monroe drove down that lonely road in her rusted pickup truck. She wasn't looking for trouble, but she was running away from debts, from heartbreak, from a life that felt like it was slowly strangling her. When the road ended and the house rose before her in a mist, she felt as though fate itself had dropped her there. The strange thing was, she didn't remember turning onto that road. The house breathes. The moment Rachel stepped onto the porch, the wood groaned as if alive. She turned the doorknob, expecting it to be locked, but it clicked open easily. Inside, the air was colder than outside, heavy as if holding its breath. The house smelled faintly of earth and old paper. Furniture covered in dust still sat in place. A rocking chair, a grand piano, a long dining table with chairs pushed back as though the family had left in the middle of dinner decades ago. But there were no plates, no food, no dust on the table. The silence wasn't empty. It pressed against her ears, humming like something beneath the floorboards. The whisper. That night, Rachel tried to sleep on the couch, wrapping herself in her jacket. At exactly 3:07 a.m., she woke with a start. The sound was faint but real, a whisper threading through the silence. It came from the walls. Rachel. Her body froze. No one should know her name here. She pressed her ear against the peeling wallpaper. The whisper came again, softer this time, but carrying a weight of sorrow. Don't leave me here. The mirror. The next morning, Rachel found a long hallway she hadn't noticed before. At the very end stood a tall mirror, framed in dark oak, untouched by dust. When she looked into it, her reflection was wrong. Her eyes seemed a shade darker, her lips pale, her face almost, but not quite, hers. She turned away quickly, but as she did, the reflection lingered, still watching. Rachel fled the hallway, her heart hammering. She told herself she'd leave. She told herself she'd drive away. Yet when she grabbed her truck keys and opened the door to the outside, the dirt road was gone. All she could see was fog. The choice. Days blurred into nights, and Rachel realized the house wasn't letting her go. It wanted something. It showed her visions, flickers of a family who had once lived there, a mother at the piano, children laughing in the hall, a father standing by the mirror with a shadow behind him. The whisper grew louder each night. Finally, on the seventh night, the voice spoke clearly. Free me, and you'll be free. Rachel stood before the mirror, her own reflection watching with hungry eyes. Behind it, she saw a girl, trapped, pressing her hands against the glass from the other side. And Rachel knew then, the house wasn't cursed. It was a prison, and it wanted a trade. The house at the edge of silence. The trade. Rachel stood trembling before the mirror, staring at the girl trapped inside. Her hair was dark and tangled. Her lips parted as though she'd been screaming for years. The girl's hands pressed against the glass, but there was no sound. Only the whisper that crawled across the air and into Rachel's bones. Free me, and you'll be free. Rachel shook her head, stepping back. This isn't real. This is just my mind breaking. But the longer she looked, the more real it became. She could see every detail. The small scar on the girl's chin, the ragged breath fogging the inside of the glass. Her reflection shifted. It smiled, a smile Rachel never made. Its lips moved, forming words she did not want to hear. Switch. The air grew colder, and suddenly Rachel felt her body weaken, her knees buckling. She fought it, pressing her palms against the frame of the mirror. If she let go, she knew she would fall inside. But what if she refused? Would she ever escape the house? Her heart pounded as the choice loomed before her. The family's secret. The next day, Rachel searched the house for answers. If this was a trap, she needed to know who had built it. She rifled through drawers, tore open cabinets, pulled books from dusty shelves. In the study, she found a locked box hidden beneath floorboards. The wood was cracked, but the lock broke easily with a crowbar she found in the garage. Inside were photographs, sepia-toned, edges frayed. A family of four stood before the same mirror, smiling stiffly. The father wore a suit too tight for his frame, his eyes sharp and cold. The mother's smile looked painted on, her hand clutching her daughter's shoulder with too much force. The children, a boy and a girl, looked frightened even as they tried to smile. On the back of one photo was written, "Eleanor must never leave." Rachel's stomach twisted. The girl in the picture, Eleanor, was the same girl in the mirror. But who put her there? And why? The storm outside. That night, rain lashed against the windows. Rachel lit a single candle, the house otherwise swallowed by darkness. Every creak of the walls sounded like footsteps. She tried to ignore it, pulling the box of photographs closer, studying each one. A storm wasn't supposed to be possible. The weather had been clear when she arrived. But outside, thunder shook the ground. She went to the window and saw nothing but black sky and endless rain. The dirt road was gone, replaced by a river that churned with shadows. When she turned back to the room, the candle blew out. The whisper returned. "Rachel, Rachel, Rachel." It grew louder, multiplying until it sounded like 100 voices pressing in from the walls. She clutched the photographs to her chest, heart racing. The last thing she saw before she fled the room was her reflection in the window, smiling while she screamed. The journal. Rachel eventually found her way into the attic. Dust choked the air, but she pressed on, pushing aside trunks and broken furniture. In the far corner, beneath a collapsed rocking horse, she found a leather-bound journal. The first page was dated 1902. It belonged to Jonathan Whitfield, the father from the photographs. His writing was fevered, the ink smudged with desperation. He wrote of how his family had been plagued by illness, by voices that came at night, by the belief that his daughter Eleanor was the key. The last pages revealed his obsession. He believed the mirror could trap death itself, and by sacrificing Eleanor, the family would be free. But the entries stopped abruptly. No final explanation. Just one last line scrawled across the page. "She will never forgive me." Rachel closed the journal with shaking hands. The girl in the mirror wasn't just a victim. She was vengeful, and she wanted out. The bargain. That night, Rachel sat before the mirror again, journal open beside her. Eleanor's face pressed against the glass, her eyes wide with urgency. "You don't understand," Rachel whispered, tears in her eyes. "If I free you, what happens to me?" The reflection, Rachel's other self, smiled again, lips curling too wide. "You already know," it whispered back. Eleanor pounded the glass, her mouth forming silent screams. Rachel could almost hear them in her head. The candlelight flickered, and shadows danced along the walls. The choice was no longer abstract. It was clawing at her. Either she stayed in the house forever, trapped, or she set Eleanor free and took her place. But deep inside, Rachel feared the truth. Eleanor didn't just want freedom. She wanted revenge. The breaking point. Rachel's mind frayed with each passing hour. She couldn't sleep, couldn't think straight. Every reflection, mirrors, windows, even the shine of a doorknob, showed her wrong. Sometimes it was her face, twisted. Sometimes it was Eleanor's, weeping. Sometimes it was empty. By the 12th night, Rachel was losing herself. She stood before the mirror one last time, journal in hand. "You want me to free you?" she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Then tell me this. What happens to me?" For the first time, Eleanor's lips moved in sync with the voice. "You become me." The mirror cracked, a thin line running from top to bottom. Rachel gasped, stumbling back. The air turned heavy, pressing down on her chest. The house was collapsing inward, boards groaning, windows shattering. The bargain had been made, whether Rachel agreed or not. And when she looked into the mirror one last time, it wasn't her face staring back. It was Eleanor's. The house at the edge of silence. Trapped. When Rachel awoke, she wasn't lying on the couch anymore. She was inside the mirror. The world beyond looked hazy, muffled, like she was staring through water. She pressed her hands against the glass, panic rushing through her veins. On the other side stood Eleanor, now free. She was no longer pale and ghostly. Her skin had color. Her movements were alive. She looked back at Rachel with a cruel smile. "You see," Eleanor whispered, her voice no longer broken but steady, filled with triumph. "One must stay. One must suffer." Rachel pounded against the glass, screaming, but her voice didn't pass through. Only her reflection trembled with desperation. Outside, Eleanor walked away, humming softly, her bare feet leaving no prints on the dusty floor. Rachel realized then, Eleanor hadn't been the prisoner of the house. The house was hers. It had always been hers. And now, Rachel belonged to it. The shadow of years. Time inside the mirror was not like time outside. Rachel tried to keep track of the days by watching the sun rise and fall through the windows of the house, but soon she lost count. Hours stretched into days, days into weeks, weeks into something longer, something endless. She saw things no human was meant to see. The house lived. Shadows crawled across the walls like insects. Faces formed in the wallpaper, whispering secrets in languages older than words. Sometimes she saw Eleanor return. Sometimes, decades later, she would appear, standing in the living room, her hair streaked with gray, her eyes sharp with age. She would look into the mirror at Rachel, still trapped, and smile as though visiting a pet. Then she would leave again. Rachel's soul cracked a little more each time. She screamed until she had no voice. She wept until there were no tears. Yet she remained, because the mirror never let go. The visitors. In what felt like a century later, Rachel saw headlights outside. A car pulling up the long-forgotten road. A family of four stepped onto the porch. A father, a mother, and two children. Their laughter cut through the silence like an intruder's knife. Rachel banged against the glass, desperate. "Don't go inside. Please don't." But they did. The house welcomed them the way it had welcomed her. Open doors, silent halls, whispers hidden in the dark. The children ran through the rooms, their small voices echoing. The parents explored cautiously, remarking on the beauty of the woodwork, the age of the furniture. Rachel screamed at them through the mirror, but they couldn't hear. That night, as the children slept, the whispers began again. Rachel watched in horror as the parents stirred awake, their eyes hollow, their faces drawn toward the mirror. They stood before it, dazed as if summoned. The house had chosen its next victims. The ritual. Rachel pressed her palms to the glass as Eleanor appeared again, ageless, smiling. "You see how it works?" she whispered, her voice like velvet over knives. "The house must always have one. It is not me who is trapped. It is whoever is foolish enough to answer the call." She glanced at the new family, now standing in a circle around the mirror, their eyes glazed over. "And now it will choose again." Rachel shook her head, her heart breaking. "No, don't do this to them." Eleanor tilted her head, watching her with cold amusement. "I don't do anything, Rachel. The house does. It has since the first stone was laid. We only obey." The mirror rippled, and Rachel felt her prison tighten, pulling her deeper into its glassy depths. She screamed, but Eleanor only laughed softly. Then she placed her hand on the glass, on Rachel's prison, and whispered, "Choose." The attempt. Rachel refused. She would not damn another family. Not like Jonathan Whitfield had damned his daughter. Not like Eleanor had damned her. She pressed her fists against the glass, willing herself not to give in. But the mirror had its own hunger. The children began to cry, clutching their parents. Shadows slithered along the walls, forming shapes too monstrous to be human. The house groaned like a living beast, its bones creaking, its breath filling the rooms. Rachel knew then, if she didn't act, the house would devour them all. Summoning every ounce of strength, she slammed her palms against the glass. Pain seared her body, as though her skin were splintering. A crack appeared across the mirror. Another. The glass shuddered, shards raining down inside her prison. The whispers screamed, deafening. The house shook violently. And for one fleeting moment, Rachel thought she might have broken the curse. The shattering. The mirror exploded. Rachel fell forward, landing hard on the floor of the living room. Glass cut her skin, blood dripping across the wooden boards. For the first time in what felt like centuries, she was free. She gasped, her lungs filling with real air. The family screamed, rushing to the door, but it wouldn't open. The house was furious. The walls shuddered, the ceiling cracked. Furniture flew across the room, smashing against walls. Eleanor appeared again, but now her face was twisted with rage. She reached for Rachel, her hand blackened, her body flickering like a dying flame. "You cannot leave," Eleanor shrieked. "You are bound to me." Rachel rose to her feet, glass cutting deeper with each step. She turned to the family, shouting, "Run to the windows. Break them." The father smashed a chair against the glass window, but it didn't shatter. The mother clutched her children, sobbing. The house roared, a sound not of wood or stone, but of something alive, ancient, monstrous. And Rachel knew. Freeing herself was not enough. The house itself had to be destroyed. The fire. Rachel stumbled into the kitchen, searching desperately. Her hands shook as she opened drawers, cabinets, cupboards. Finally, she found matches, old and damp, but still usable. She grabbed a lantern filled with oil, smashing it onto the floor. Flames burst upward, hungry and wild. The fire spread fast, devouring the wooden beams, licking the wallpaper. The house screamed again, shaking violently as if in agony. Eleanor appeared in the flames, her face contorted. "You think fire can kill it?" she hissed. "This house is older than you can imagine. It will never die." Rachel ignored her, tossing matches into every room she could reach. The flames grew, smoke curling through the halls. The children coughed, clinging to their mother. The father smashed at the window again, and this time, crack. A fracture appeared in the glass. Again, Rachel screamed. The father slammed the chair once more, and the window shattered. Cold night air rushed in. The family scrambled through, one by one, into the darkness outside. Rachel turned back, coughing, her body trembling. The house was burning, collapsing. Eleanor screamed, her voice twisting with rage and pain. Rachel knew she had only moments left. The house at the edge of silence. The last stand. The smoke was thick, clawing into Rachel's lungs as she staggered back into the living room. The mirror, her prison for what felt like centuries, was nothing but shattered fragments scattered across the floor. They reflected the fire's glow, tiny pieces of hell burning on the wooden boards. Eleanor stood in the middle of the room, her body flickering like a dying flame, her eyes burning with hatred. The firelight passed through her, making her look less human and more like the shadow of something ancient. "You ruined it," Eleanor screamed, her voice layered with dozens of others, male and female, old and young, as if the house itself was speaking through her. "Do you know what you've done?" Rachel coughed, blood staining her lips, but her eyes burned with defiance. "I broke the chain," she rasped. "You can't keep us here anymore." The house shook violently. Pictures fell from the walls. Beams snapped overhead, raining sparks. The floor beneath Rachel's feet groaned as if it would swallow her whole. Eleanor advanced, her form warping, her arms stretching unnaturally long. Her shadow reached the walls, covering every surface until Rachel was surrounded. "You think fire will kill me?" Eleanor hissed, her face inches from Rachel's. "I am this house. I am every soul it has ever taken. You didn't free yourself, you only took my place." Rachel stumbled back, but her foot struck a shard of the mirror. She bent down, her fingers wrapping around the jagged glass. The shard pulsed in her hand, glowing faintly, as though it still held some of the house's power. And suddenly, Rachel understood. The mirror had been the heart of the house, the prison, yes, but also the anchor. If it could trap a soul, it could also destroy one. She clutched the shard tighter, her palm bleeding as it cut into her skin. Eleanor screamed again, lunging forward. Rachel raised the shard high, her voice breaking through the roar of the flames. "You don't get to choose anymore. Not me. Not them. Not anyone." And with all her strength, she drove the shard straight into Eleanor's chest. The scream that followed was not human. It was the howl of the house itself, walls splitting open, windows exploding outward, beams collapsing in showers of fire and ash. Eleanor's form convulsed, splitting apart into 1,000 flickering shadows before vanishing in a burst of blinding light. Rachel was thrown backward, her body slamming against the burning floor. Pain seared through her, but she forced herself up, crawling toward the broken window. The flames chased her, licking at her heels. The ceiling caved in just as she dragged herself through the shattered frame and tumbled into the wet grass outside. The family she had saved stood a few yards away, huddled together, wide-eyed, their faces pale from terror. The father rushed forward, grabbing Rachel's arm, pulling her away just as the house gave one final, monstrous roar. The structure collapsed inward, swallowed by flames, until there was nothing left but a smoldering heap of ash and glowing embers. For the first time since she had arrived, the silence was gone, and in its place was freedom. Rachel lay on the cold grass, staring up at the night sky. Stars blinked faintly through the smoke, and she felt the weight of centuries lift from her chest. She was alive. She was free. But somewhere in the ashes, beneath the smoke and the ruin, Rachel thought she heard a faint whisper. Not begging, not desperate, waiting. The house at the edge of silence. Ashes and echoes. The night after the fire was heavy with smoke, the kind that clung to skin and burned the throat long after the flames had died. Rachel sat on the damp grass, wrapped in the father's coat. The family she had freed kept their distance, half grateful, half afraid. They whispered among themselves, casting nervous glances at her, as if unsure whether she was their savior or the last remnant of the house's curse. The ruins still smoldered behind them. The house that had devoured generations was gone, reduced to glowing embers. But Rachel's heart would not rest. Every time the wind shifted, carrying with it the scent of ash, she swore she could hear it, the faint whisper of Eleanor's voice. Not gone, not yet. Rachel closed her eyes and remembered the mirror, the way it had pulsed in her hand, as though alive. She had shattered it, yes, but had she destroyed its power, or only scattered it into 100 pieces, waiting to be found again? The father approached slowly, his youngest child clinging to his side. You saved us, he said, his voice raw with emotion. We were trapped there for so long. I can't even remember the last time I felt the wind. His eyes filled with tears. But what about you? Why did the house choose you? Rachel stared at the glowing rubble, the heat rising from it in waves. Because I was lost, she whispered, and it feeds on the lost. The man nodded slowly, as if he understood. But Rachel wasn't sure she did. When dawn broke, the fog lifted from the road, and for the first time in weeks, or years, the path out was visible. The family walked ahead, their shadows stretching long in the pale light. Rachel followed, her body aching with every step, her palms scarred from the glass. At the crest of the hill, she turned back one last time. The field was empty except for the smoldering heap of wood and stone. The house at the edge of silence was gone, but Rachel's gut twisted. The birds were singing in the trees, but not near the ruins. The grass around the house was blackened, but not dead. Something pulsed beneath the soil, faint and steady, like a heartbeat. She realized then, you can burn wood, you can shatter glass, but silence never dies. That night, Rachel dreamt she was standing in front of the mirror again. Only this time, she wasn't alone. 1,000 faces pressed against the glass from the other side. Children, women, men, all staring at her with hollow eyes. And at the very center, Eleanor smiled. Thank you, Rachel, she whispered. You freed me from the house. But houses can be rebuilt. And silence always finds a new edge. Rachel woke with a gasp, drenched in sweat. Her scarred palm burned where she had once held the shard. And in the darkness of her motel room, she thought she saw a reflection move across the mirror on the wall, just a fraction too late to be her own. The house at the edge of silence was gone, but its shadow was already looking for a new home.